Warhammer 40k is massive. It's the most played tabletop wargame around. It's got hundreds of books dedicated to its story and its lore. It's expanding to Amazon and various other TV show type services. But my favorite way to engage with Warhammer 40k has always been through its video games, starting with Dawn of War and now with Space Marine 2, Darktide, and Rogue Trader. Now, don't get me wrong, these games aren't perfect by any means, and although they're all in different genres, they all do the one thing that I look for in a Warhammer 40k video game. They all immerse me in Warhammer 40k, and they do it very well. And with that being said, I don't think that any of these games set out to be the dominant game in their respective genres. Enter Total War Warhammer 40k. Recently, I was able to play an early version of the game, and my first impressions of the game are that it's very good. Total War Warhammer 40k is just like Space Marine 2, Darktide, and Rogue Trader in that the Warhammer 40k immersion is front and center. However, where the game differs from those other Warhammer 40k games is that it's actually setting itself up to be the de facto strategy game for millions of players for the next 10 to 20 years. The build of the game that I played offered an introduction, a dose of the campaign for Space Marines, and it also offered a good look at what a big battle is going to look like. And I'm not going to go over every gameplay mechanic that was presented in this build, but what I will say is that this is the smoothest that Total War has ever felt for me. If the developers managed to make the overworld campaign map as enticing and as good as Immortal Empires from Total Warhammer 3, then I just know that with the combination of the combat that I just experienced in this build and the campaign, I'm going to spend hundreds if not thousands of hours playing this game. One of the first things that I noticed about the combat in this game is that the actual AI for your units is a lot smarter than it was in previous Total War games. And I think that this is primarily a quality of life adjustment for console players, since this game is also going to be brought to consoles. If you didn't know, now you do. And at first, I thought that this might take away too much from the real-time strategy, micromanagement aspects of the game that I tend to actually enjoy from these kinds of games, but I felt like with the scale of these battles, there's always something that I needed to react to, or there was always something that I needed to pay attention to. I was engaged throughout my entire gameplay session. There was never a moment where I felt like I was bored or I felt like the game was simply playing itself. And hey, maybe that's just an army thing. I played as the Space Marines and they were extremely fun, very engaging, had various stratagems that you could engage with, various abilities that you could use. The mechanic that I think that I enjoyed the most was deep striking, or calling in a group of Terminators in order to teleport right next to the enemy front line, or dropping drop pods from orbit in order to reinforce your army with more Space Marines. This was done very well, and it makes the Space Marines feel like an extremely dynamic army to play. Another really great thing about the combat in this game is it doesn't take 5 whole business days to turn your siege or vehicle units. If you've played other Total War games, then you're probably used to vehicles or siege weaponry turning extremely slow, like at a snail's pace. Historically, and for accuracy purposes, obviously this makes a lot of sense, but man, it is just not smooth or fluid at all. In Total Warhammer 40k, the vehicles seem extremely deadly because of how fast they're able to react to things on the battlefield, and because of how many weapons they're equipped with. I think that dreadnoughts are going to be a really popular option because not only do they have artillery pieces and ranged weaponry attached to them, but they also perform extremely well in melee. But honestly, with that being said, a lot of the other vehicles felt significantly faster than your average squad of units, so I could see those also being extremely deadly just because of how fast they are. I see this as a very good thing, because if these vehicles feel this smooth and good to use, then I can only imagine how an army of, say, White Scars, Eldari, Drukhari, or even Tau are going to feel. But I'm not here just to glaze the game to infinity. There are some things that I experienced that need a little bit of work or just haven't been too fleshed out yet. this could just be me, but I had a hard time visually tracking what my units were firing at or what enemy units were firing at because the bullets or projectiles didn't seem highly visible. To be fair, this was probably user error because I had my camera zoomed way out so that I could view the entire battlefield and react to different threats accordingly as they popped up. But I've got a feeling that this is also a console-oriented quality of life feature. And this is purely speculation. I'm not sure how consoles are going to run Total Warhammer 40k, but I would imagine that console players are going to really hate the Necrons because if their projectiles from their laser-oriented weapons are vibrant, bright, and linger on the screen for just a little bit longer than everything else in the game, it's probably going to melt their system. With that being said, Total Warhammer 40k is built on a completely different engine, one that I'm pretty sure is able to handle sci-fi much better than the previous ones ever could. Additionally, the army painter that I had to work with was extremely bare bones. I've been told that this is going to be addressed before the game releases, but there's going to have to be a lot added to this thing in order for it to be as comprehensive as something like Dawn of War or even Space Marine 2. For example, I love the Blood Ravens. They're my favorite chapter in all of Warhammer 40k, and although I tried to create a Blood Ravens army in this game, I just couldn't get it right because you're not able to change the coloration of the shoulder pads individually. The Blood Ravens emblem doesn't even exist in the game, and I wasn't able to use the other assets to create the Blood Ravens emblem. Again, I'm sure that this will be addressed before the game releases. The Space Marines in particular are the most important army to get this right for because Space Marines are literally the most popular army in all of Warhammer 40k. This is going to be singularly the reason why a ton of people pick this game up, is just to play as Space Marines, customize them to their liking, and then kill Xenos and heretics. Either way, what's important to me is that the foundation of the gameplay has already been established. It's already here and visible for us to inspect, critique, and provide feedback on. If I played this version of the game at this stage of development and I was experiencing game-breaking bugs, then I would definitely be worried or concerned, but I didn't experience any of that here. I have no doubts that whenever this game launches, the gameplay is going to be solid on release, but what I'm concerned with is that there are so many different armies and factions in 40k. There are going to be people who are waiting for their favorite faction to be added to the game for years. Personally, I lucked out because both my favorite Imperium faction and Xenos faction are already in the game, and we all know that chaos is right around the corner. But man, who knows when the Tau or Gene Stealer cults are going to be added to the game? It's probably going to be a while. All I know is that if we get Gene Stealer cults in Total Warhammer 40k before we get Gene Stealer cults in Darktide, I'm gonna have to call John Warhammer or something. I'm gonna have a serious problem. We're gonna have to get the Inquisition in on this. Anyways, I had a ton of fun with the little that I had to play of Total Warhammer 40k, and I am very optimistic about this game. As always, I appreciate your viewership. Don't forget to like and hype the video, and subscribe to the channel if you love Warhammer 40k. This has been Jefficus, the Emperor Protects.